How's it going, everybody, and welcome back to the SFS channel. My name's Gavin, and today we've got a little bit of a less traditional ADP battle for this week's episode. Typically what I do here is every week I take two players who are going very, very close in their average draft positions. I break them down, decide which one, if they're both on the table, I would rather have for my 2021 fantasy football team. But today, shout out to my man Moose on Instagram, who has been around here on the channel since last season, even donated to a couple of live streams for me last year. Really awesome guy, hit me up and he said a lot of people would like to see the breakdown of the Dallas Cowboys offense and which wide receiver, if it came down to it, you would rather have on your team, and at their draft position, which one would I rather have, of course, between Amari Cooper and Ceedee Lamb for this fantasy season. So a great idea. I said, awesome, let's do it. And so we're going to be breaking that down in today's video. These players are separated a little bit more than usual in their average draft positions, but I think that there comes a breaking point between their two fantasy values that makes me want one of them more so than the other based on the players going around them on the draft board and their expected productions for this fantasy season. So if you're new around here, make sure to hop down, click that subscribe button, and turn the bell on so you're never late for an episode around here and are caught up whenever I post something new. I've got 6 fresh videos coming out every week at minimum. If we've got news and stuff like that, I'll be hitting you guys up with some more content. But without further ado, we're not wasting any more time. Let's hit that intro and get straight in to the video. All right, here we go. So we are going to be diving into each of these two players. Again, Ceedee Lamb and Amari Cooper, talking through a 2020 recap, breaking down how last season should impact this year. And I'm going to be talking about a lot of bracketed statistics here and looking at sample sizes from a certain time frame of weeks. So we'll get into that later and you'll understand why we're doing that. And trying at the end of the day to conceptualize things and put it all into context so it's very manageable, digestible, and understandable for you all out there, and it doesn't just seem like I'm tossing numbers around and saying a bunch of weird stats that would otherwise seem pointless here. So I'll do my best here to make sure that everything I'm talking about makes a lot of sense, because I had to dive a little bit more into this fantasy situation to make my ultimate decision. Because they both play for the same team, because there was an injury to the starting quarterback last season, and there was just a lot of factors at play here this season. So Amari Cooper, something I think that is important here to note. Heading into this big offseason for Dallas, they're obviously the stars of Hard Knocks, and they're going to be in the primetime spotlight this offseason during training camp and the preseason. That's going to be really entertaining and awesome to watch. You've got Jerry Jones, a lot of big personalities, Ezekiel Elliott, Dak Prescott coming back from injury, Micah Parsons as a fiery rookie. A lot of stuff's going on with this Dallas team. But unfortunately, Amari Cooper is entering the offseason on the PUP list. That means physically unable to perform. So why is that? What is wrong with Amari Cooper? After last season, so in about January, while the playoffs were going underway and the Cowboys were taking a quick vacation, Amari Cooper had foot/ankle surgery to repair some stuff that was bothering him for the majority of last season. Look, he saw a setback reportedly, and that's taking his injury timetable for return a bit longer. But as we approach the start of team workouts, he's saying it's relatively dicey. He might be able to suit up and go, maybe not. That's fine. I'm taking my time. If I'm the Dallas Cowboys training staff, give this dude the time he needs to come back 100%. There's no reason risking it here. He's a vet. I mean, he's not an old vet by any means because he's still just in his late 20s. But he's been on the team for a few years now. I think they went out and traded for him in 2018. And Dak and Amari had a really special connection. Those two were pretty awesome off the bat that season. I remember I had him in fantasy, and it was a complete game changer when he got traded from the, at the time, Oakland Raiders over to the Cowboys, and he was killing the Eagles and all kinds of fun stuff. But let him recover. Let him get back to full strength. I would hate to see them push him too hard, and Amari can sometimes be a bit injury prone. I don't want to see that play an impact into his fantasy outlook this year. That would stink for a guy who's got his quarterback coming back this season and a lot of stuff heading in his favor. So the Cowboys reportedly are not concerned with this injury, and even though he's had a setback, they're not too worried about lingering effects into the season. And since we are so early in the season, we're not getting close to the playoffs. The Cowboys aren't trying to make a push. They don't have an opponent that they're facing next week. More often than not, I'm going to take a team's word for it in the offseason as it pertains to a player's injury, whereas if you get into late December, November even, teams will start saying wishy-washy stuff so that the opponent doesn't really know how to game plan or what they're up against the next week. But like I said, no reason for Dallas to lie right now. They should be shining light onto all of their players' injuries right now, and for the most part being truthful with us, the faithful fantasy football community. So Amari last season, all things considered, he only played 5 games. It was really 4.5 games with Dak Prescott last season. Still put up really good numbers in this offense. So he finished the year, his stat line, he finished as the wide receiver 17 on 92 receptions for 1,114 yards and 5 touchdowns on 130 targets and 21% of that Cowboys offensive target share. Something I want to note, I talk a lot about target shares. It's a very important number, but once again, we got to put context behind it here. So 21% of the Cowboys target share doesn't sound as high as 34% for Devontae Adams and the Green Bay Packers. I think it's 30% for Stephon Diggs and the Bills. There's other players who have managed to accumulate a much higher percentage of their offensive passing numbers. But look, not many teams passed the ball more than Dallas did last season. They still ran the ball a healthy amount, but they were on the field a lot because their defense was trash. Throwing the ball late, trying to stay in games. I mean, 21% of the Cowboys' offensive target share goes miles further than it does if you were to have even 25% of the Browns or the Ravens' target share, where they're actually running the ball more of the time than they are actually throwing the ball. So Mark Andrews for the Baltimore Ravens had 25% of the target share on 89 targets. Amari Cooper had 21% of his team's target share on 130 targets. So clearly it makes a difference what team you're on. It's awesome. You want to be leading your team in the target share percentage, but it's not always the end-all be-all in stacking it up as a raw stat against another player from another team's target share numbers. You got to put some context behind it. You can twist stats to make them look the way you want to, but I'm trying to keep things as streamlined and as understandable for everybody as possible, like I said today. So Cooper was a beast last year. That is pretty dang good production when you talk about shaky quarterbacks for 11 starts. He played all 16 games last year. We're talking Andy Dalton behind a trash offensive line, making hurried improv decisions, which is not his game. Throwing off balance, off the back foot, scrambling. Like, this was not a good situation for any quarterback. And then we talk about Ben DiNucci starting a game, Garrett Gilbert being in the mix there. Dallas was a mess, and it was kind of sad to watch. And for a really awesome offensive personnel group, they kind of had to deal with some things that they were not expecting at all last season. So all things considered, I would say Amari weathered the storm pretty well. Again, finished as wide receiver 17 on 11.8 fantasy points per game. Pretty solid, a middle-of-the-pack wide receiver too. Again, putting up those numbers in that situation is all the more impressive. Ceedee Lamb getting into his 2020 season, and something I actually just want to recap here is both of these players are moving up and trending upwards in my draft guide rankings here. Obviously, if you saw yesterday's video, one of these players made an appearance on that list, in my top 12 wide receiver rankings list, so go check that out if you haven't tuned into that video already. But Ceedee Lamb in his rookie season was quite the impressive performer. He had some major highlights last year: 74 receptions, 935 yards, and 5 receiving touchdowns on just 109 targets, and 18% of that team target share. Again, the Cowboys' target share numbers, although they might be lower, and they did have a lot of people taking target share in that offense, it's worth more than your Ravens, your Browns, or even your Packers, who are all more run-centric and more balanced teams. So maybe if the Cowboys take a step forward this fantasy season, we will see regression in the overall passing stats in this team, but I think that defense is still pretty bad. They're still going to throw the ball. They've got Zeke back there, but Mike McCarthy is a pass-first coach. I'm a Green Bay Packer fan. If I had $1 for every time that dude said, we want to run the ball, this is centered around the run game, I'd probably be a millionaire, because he, over the, 10 or so years he was the coach in Green Bay, probably said that 100 times a season, and during the offseason, even more than that. And we were still outrageously Aaron Rodgers and pass dependent. So take my word for it, they're going to throw the ball a lot and use their elementary 4 vertical schemes for most of the season. So not to take a shot at you Dallas Cowboy fans out there, but I don't exactly have a positive image of Mike McCarthy and how he left my franchise. So Ceedee, I would say, was pretty dang impressive as a rookie last year. Played out of the slot, whereas Amari Cooper was more of an outside threat last year. But both of these players, from an overall talent perspective, are exceptional. Ceedee actually added an element of his game that Amari Cooper didn't really have. And both of them were utilized in that end-around wide receiver run game. But Ceedee Lamb was the one that was able to actually be productive with those carries. He had 10 of them for 82 yards and a touchdown. And another little cool tidbit is that Ceedee actually had a kick return touchdown as well on an onside kick where he basically just covered it and took off to the house. So a very good awareness and situational player here in Ceedee Lamb. So the next thing that I want to break down between these two players as it relates to recapping their 2020 season is I figured I better look at these two players' numbers with Dak Prescott on the field. Obviously, they're full-time starting quarterback when he's healthy. If you didn't see last year, he basically crunched his leg in half and missed the last 11 games of the season. He's reportedly, based off of what's coming out of Cowboys camp, 100% ready to go for this year and is going to be full guns ablaze in week 1. So going back to Amari Cooper here, in the 5 games with Dak Prescott at the helm last season, he had 55 targets in those games, was clearly a lot better of a producer with Dak on the field in terms of efficiency. He had some really strong performances in those games, had some deep balls. If you remember the one-handed catch down the field against Atlanta, that was a pretty impressive play. But going back to Ceedee Lamb, he actually had 51 targets in those first 5 games with Dak Prescott as the starting quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys. So what does this tell us? Well, when Dak was on the field, despite those being the first 5 games of Ceedee Lamb's NFL career, he was only -4 in the target department when Prescott was the quarterback. Doing simple math here and taking their end of season total target count and subtracting Dak Prescott's contributions with those two guys on and off the field. And by the way, Ceedee Lamb and Amari Cooper both started 16 games, so there's not any additional math or anything to do here. They both played the full season. Dak Prescott did not. Again, 55 targets in games with Dak Prescott on the field for Cooper and 51 for Ceedee Lamb. Without Dak Prescott, it was a completely different picture, and Ceedee Lamb by far got the short end of the stick and the lesser share of the target volume with those other 3 names at the quarterback spot. 75 targets for Amari Cooper, who eventually outpaced Ceedee Lamb by 21 looks, as opposed to just 58 for Ceedee Lamb. So a relatively sizable gap here. We're looking at 17 targets in differential between the two players. Why is that? Well, a more seasoned and veteran quarterback is going to just plain and simple be able to find open players, find guys that have created space for themselves between them and the defender. A more elementary level quarterback or a below average starting NFL quarterback, even Andy Dalton, who is not in my opinion, quality starter in the National Football League. He's a low-end starter for some teams or a very good backup option for others. He is typically a first read Randy, and that means that the first player on the depth chart, the most reliable option, he is locked in and zoned in on that player. And for Allen Robinson owners, ding, 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 that's going to be great for him in Chicago next season when he is clicking, locking, and throwing to him over and over and over again next year. That's besides the point. We're talking Dallas Cowboys right here. So even in a more extreme sense, Garrett Gilbert, Ben DiNucci, those guys are just throwing to the top dog, who on paper is Amari Cooper here. These are both incredibly talented players, but just from a logical standpoint, if I'm an NFL quarterback and that's my thought process, I'm going to the seasoned vet, the guy who's made Pro Bowls before in his career, even before I go to the very talented but still rookie player on this team. So not to say that the difference in age and experience makes a big difference here for fantasy and target purposes, but it did in this situation because we didn't have competent quarterback play throwing to both of these wide receivers. So basically, what does this tell me? When Dak Prescott is on the field and healthy, when we expect him to be, these players are on more of an even playing field than I think we give them credit for. Heading into this season, and we're going to wrap this video up pretty quickly here because we're going to get into ADPs and value, players going around or at similar draft positions to both of these options. I think that these guys are more similar than they are different. And for a player like Amari Cooper, who's being drafted 40th overall or in the early 4th round of 12-team fantasy leagues, I'm not so sure that he is that much better than Ceedee Lamb, who might have just as good, if not better, upside than him this season. Why might I say that Ceedee Lamb has better upside? Well, I think that just the style and the roles that these two players have for this team, again, I talked about this earlier in the video, Amari Cooper is lining up outside more. He's going to be your home run hitter. He might still see a few more targets in the overall spectrum of the season than Ceedee Lamb gets, but Amari Cooper doesn't really score, and I would say isn't an extreme red zone threat. We see him do more of his damage over the top, running past corners, and running flashy deep routes. Oftentimes, that will net you some big plays, but Amari Cooper is still not the caliber of a player of a Tyreek Hill who is able to cash those into touchdowns because he goes the extra mile with his speed. Amari Cooper is still a very above average level speed demon down the field, but he is not that much better than a top corner that is running that fast down the field that won't catch him. So 5 touchdowns, it doesn't seem like very much, and it didn't seem like that much for Ceedee Lamb, who actually had 7 total, if we want to talk about that. Obviously, that kick return touchdown, though, didn't have any impact on his statistical output for fantasy purposes. Nonetheless, I think Cooper is going to have the ability to put up really great yardage, be extremely efficient on a per-touch basis, but that touchdown ceiling for him I find to be very low because he doesn't really run the whole route tree. Again, it's those deeper routes, and he's looking to make splash plays with each of those receptions. Ceedee Lamb plays out of the slot, and players who play in the slot run the entire route tree. Short, intermediate, deep passing game. These players do it all. We see them do a lot of the dirty work for the offense, and down in the red zone, it's probably the most advantageous spot to start at out of the snap. You're able, in forcing the cornerback across from you, who, by the way, I didn't even note this, the outside corners are typically the best corners on a team. Usually defenses don't send their best cornerback at the opposing team's slot receiver. They usually line them up against the team's X-wide receiver, which in this case is quote-unquote Amari Cooper, although some stats tell us otherwise as it regards to Michael Gallup. But we're not even talking about him today because his ADP is 6-7 rounds later than both of these guys. So, again, Amari Cooper is not only drawing the tougher coverage from the opposing defense, but he's also limited in some aspects to the routes he's running. Ceedee Lamb is seeing lighter coverage, running the whole route tree, able to either break in or out of his routes and completely throw defensive backs for mismatches and misunderstandings. I've seen Ceedee make some of the best plays in the end zone last season, if you remember that touchdown catch he had against the Vikings. I think he can be a complete menace in that area of the field with Dak Prescott under center this year. Zeke's going to get a lot of goal line opportunities and take a lot of that work in that short yardage passing game away on the goal line. But Ceedee, I still think, is the premier option in that area of the field. You talk about everything he does well. He's an elite athlete. He's an elite route runner. He's got some of the best awareness. You talk about a Justin Jefferson and how elite he was. I think quarterback play really limited what we could see from Ceedee Lamb last year and the overall ceiling that he could reach, because he's that level of a player as well. I think Ceedee Lamb's ceiling as an actual talent might be higher than it is for Amari Cooper, and I'm not saying that he's going to reach that in 2021, and I'm not even saying he will be overall finish as a higher ranked player than Amari Cooper does at the end of the day in the fantasy standings. But when I can get Ceedee Lamb in the middle of the 5th round as opposed to the early 4th, And I expect these players to be fairly neck and neck in both target share because, again, when Dak was on the field, they were pretty dank even in that department. Maybe instead of being separated by 3% like last year, they're only separated by 1 or 2, which will make a big difference in the grand scheme of things. So I expect both of these players to be on the fringe of wide receiver 1 performers on a week-to-week basis. Very high upside wide receiver 2s in weeks they don't reach that metric. But still, this is a value thing here. When I look at the other players on the board that are going around Amari Cooper, I would rather have an Allen Robinson, a Terry McLaurin, who are both ranked higher in my rankings. And guys like Julio Jones and Chris Godwin are nipping at their heels and right behind them. Ceedee Lamb, on the other hand, has Adam Thielen. The one option I would say I would take before him is Tyler Lockett at this area on the draft board. But then the other wide receivers in this position are Devontae Smith and Kenny Golladay, who both have their own respective drawbacks and risks attached to their ADP. So again, there's 14 draft spots separating these two players. But at the end of the day, if you're going to take one of these two Dallas wideouts, I expect a big jump from Ceedee Lamb in 2021. And I think that he can go neck and neck with Amari Cooper in overall fantasy production. All right, there you have it. So there was a lot of stuff to digest and break down in today's video, but I hope you got the overall message here. I'm not saying that at the end of the day, Ceedee Lamb is a higher ranked player in my overall projections and draft day rankings, but as it regards to where they're being taken off of draft boards, I would rather take advantage of the value that Ceedee Lamb presents at his mid-5th round ADP than I would with Amari Cooper's early 4th round ADP in those 12-team leagues, because I think that at the end of the day, they're going to finish very, very similar in their total fantasy output for the coming season. So thank you all so much for watching today's video. Let me know down in the comment section below what your thoughts are on this debate, this topic, and why you might think one way or another. I'd be really interested to hear your guys' thoughts down below. As always, if you're new around here, make sure to click that subscribe button. If you've been watching me for a while or want to hop in some of these SFS community mock drafts, the free Discord link is in the description of today's video. And all you got to do is go down there, click that, and you'll be joined in there right away. And then myself or Eric within a few hours should be able to add you as an official member of that group. We'd love to have you there. We want to get 100 people in there before the start of the 2021 regular season. And we think that that'd be an awesome way to kick off the new year. So once again, thank you so much for watching today's video. I'll see you for tomorrow's episode. Peace out.